Mastering ought to in English language. Hello, language learners. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of English grammar, specifically, a very special modal verb, ought to. Modal verbs express necessity or possibility, and ought to is commonly used for advice, obligation, or duty. By the end of this video, you should be more comfortable in forming sentences with ought to. So, let's get started. The phrase ought to behaves a lot like a modal verb and can express a similar range of meanings to should. It is used to talk about an action that is the best or correct thing to do, or a likely event or situation. It has a formal tone and is more common in British English than American English. For example, consider this sentence: "You ought to apologize." This sentence is giving advice that the correct thing to do is to apologize. In affirmative sentences, ought to is followed by a verb in the base form. The structure is as follows: subject plus ought to plus base form of verb plus. Let's look at an example. She ought to study for the exam. Here, she is the subject, ought to is our modal verb, and study is the base form of the verb. When forming negative sentences, we use ought not to, followed by the base form of the verb. However, in everyday speech, oughtn't to is also used. The structure for negative sentences is subject plus ought not to plus base form of verb plus. For instance, you ought not to ignore the warnings. In this case, you is the subject, ought not to is the modal verb, and ignore is the base form of the verb. When forming questions or interrogative sentences, we start with ought, then the subject, followed by to, and the base form of the verb. Here's the structure: ought plus subject plus to plus base form of verb plus. A good example is, ought we to invite them to the party? And that's it, folks. We hope this guide to using ought to in English grammar has been helpful. It's a useful and flexible phrase that can help you express advice, duty, and obligations with a bit more finesse. Remember, practice makes perfect. So, try using ought to in your conversations and writing today. Happy learning, and until our next grammar adventure.